A guy has been asking the prettiest girl in town for a date, and finally she agrees to go out with him. He takes her to a nice restaurant and buys her a fancy dinner with expensive wine. On the way home, he pulls over to the side of the road in a secluded spot. They start necking and he's getting pretty excited. He starts to reach under her skirt and she stops him, saying she's a virgin and wants to stay that way. "Well, okay," he says. "How about a..." "Yuck!" she screams. "I'm not putting that thing in my mouth." He says, "Well then, how about a hand job?" "I've never done that," she says. "What do I have to do?" "Well," he answers, "remember when you were a kid and you used to shake up a Coke bottle and spray your brother with it?" She nods. "Well, it's just like that." So he pulls it out and she grabs hold of it and starts shaking it. A few seconds later, his head flops back on the headrest, his eyes close, snot starts to run out of his nose, wax blows out of his ear, and he screams out in pain. "What's wrong?" she cries out. "Take your thumb off the end!" A newlywed couple wakes up on the first morning of their honeymoon in the Caribbean and decides to take a stroll down the beach. On their way, they pass a shanty house, and sitting on the front porch is an overweight woman, stark naked, legs akimbo, eating a slice of watermelon. The husband sees this and, liking the idea of his new wife exhibiting her body in public, asks her whether she would do the same. The wife looks at him in disgust and refuses. The second morning, they pass the shanty house again, and sure enough, the overweight woman is sitting on the porch, stark naked, legs akimbo, eating another slice of watermelon. Not being put off by his new wife's refusal, the husband inquires of his wife, "Why don't you go over and ask that woman what it feels like to sit there naked, letting the air waft over your..." The wife again refuses. This continues each morning for 2 weeks until it is the last day of the honeymoon. Each morning they would pass by the woman, each morning the husband would try to persuade his new wife to copy her, and each morning the wife would refuse. However, it being the last morning, the husband gives it one more try and inquires of his wife, "Why don't you go over and ask that woman what it feels like to sit there naked, letting the air waft over your..." The wife finally gives in, opens the gate of the shanty house and walks up to the overweight woman on the front porch. "What does it feel like to sit there naked, letting the air waft over your..." she asks hesitantly. "I don't rightly know," replies the woman, "but it sure keeps the flies off of my watermelon." A fellow was on his honeymoon near his favorite fishing lake, and he would fish from dawn to dark with his favorite fishing guide. One day the guide, a friend of many years, mentioned that the honeymoon seemed to be spent fishing. "Yes, but you know how I love to fish." "But aren't you newlyweds supposed to be into something else?" "Yes, but she's got gonorrhea, and you know how I love to fish." A few hours later, "I understand, but that's not the only way to have..." "I know, but she's got diarrhea, and you know how I love to fish." The following day, "Sure, but that's still not the only way to have..." "Yeah, but she's got phiria, and you know how I love to fish." Late that afternoon, thoroughly frustrated by the guide's comments, I said, "I guess I'm not sure why you'd marry someone with health problems like that. It's because she's also got worms, and you know I just love to fish." A woman meets this Marine in a bar. They talk, they connect, they end up leaving together. They get back to his place, and as he shows her around his apartment, she notices that one wall of his bedroom is completely filled with soft, sweet, cuddly teddy bears. There are 3 shelves in the bedroom, with hundreds and hundreds of cute, cuddly teddy bears carefully placed in rows, covering the entire wall. It was obvious that he had taken quite some time to lovingly arrange them, and she was immediately touched by the amount of thought he had put into organizing the display. There were small bears all along the bottom shelf, medium-sized bears covering the length of the middle shelf, and huge, enormous bears running all the way along the top shelf. She found it strange for an obviously masculine Marine to have such a large collection of teddy bears. She is quite impressed by his sensitive side, but doesn't mention this to him. They share a bottle of wine and continue talking, and after a while she finds herself thinking, "Oh my God, maybe this guy could be the one. Maybe he could be the future father of my children." She turns to him and kisses him lightly on the lips. He responds warmly. They continue to kiss. The passion builds, and he romantically lifts her in his arms and carries her into his bedroom, where they rip off each other's clothes and make hot, steamy love. She is so overwhelmed that she responds with more passion, more creativity, and more heat than she has ever known. After an intense, explosive night of raw passion with this sensitive Marine, they're lying there together in the afterglow. The woman rolls over, gently strokes his chest, and asks coyly, "Well, how was it?" The Marine gently smiles at her, strokes her cheek, looks deeply into her eyes, and says, "Help yourself to any prize from the middle shelf." 3 cheerleaders walked into the doctor's office to get an exam. The first one was called into the doctor's room and sat down. The doctor comes in and asks her to take off her top. After she did, the doctor noticed a mark on her chest. "What happened to you? It looks like a big S is burnt into your chest," the doctor asked. "Well, my boyfriend likes it a little rough," explains the doctor. "Well, during he likes me to put on his Letterman sweater. Then we have mad, passionate sex, and he's from Stanford." After the doctor was done with the first cheerleader, he called in the second one. "Take off your top," asked the doctor. Sure enough, there was a mark on her chest as well, but of an H. "What happened to you?" the doctor asked. "Well, my boyfriend likes it a little rough," explains the doctor. "Well, during sex, he likes me to put on his Letterman sweater. Then we have mad, passionate sex, and he's from Harvard." When they were finished, the doctor called in the third cheerleader and told her to take off her top, so she did. On her chest is a big M, so the doctor says, "Let me guess, you got this mark from your boyfriend in Minnesota." "No," says the girl, "my girlfriend in Wisconsin." A man had just settled into his seat next to the window on the plane when another man sat down in the aisle seat and put his black Labrador retriever in the middle seat next to the man. The first man looked very quizzically at the dog and asked why the dog was allowed on the plane. The second man explained that he was a DEA agent and that the dog was a sniffing dog. "His name is Sniffer, and he's the best there is. I'll show you once we get airborne, when I put him to work." The plane took off, and once it had leveled out, the agent said, "Watch this." He told Sniffer to search. Sniffer jumped down, walked along the aisle, and finally sat very purposefully next to a woman for several seconds. Sniffer then returned to his seat and put one paw on the agent's arm. The agent said, "Good boy," and he turned to the man and said, "That woman is in possession of marijuana, so I'm making a note of her seat number, and the authorities will apprehend her when we land." "Say, that's pretty neat," replied the first man. Once again, the agent sent Sniffer to search the aisles. The lab sniffed about, sat down beside a man for a few seconds, returned to its seat, and this time he placed 2 paws on the agent's arm. The agent said, "That man is carrying cocaine, so again I'm making a note of his seat number for the police." "I like it," said his seatmate. The agent then told Sniffer to search again. Sniffer walked up and down the aisles for a little while, sat down for a moment, and then came racing back to the agent, jumped into the middle seat, and proceeded to shit all over the place. The first man was really grossed out by this behavior and couldn't figure out how or why a well-trained dog would behave like that, so he asked the agent, "What's going on?" The agent nervously replied, "He just found a bomb." An 85-year-old man went to his doctor's office for his annual physical. After the physical, the doctor asked him to get some sperm for testing. The doctor gave the man a jar and said, "Take this home and bring back some semen tomorrow." The old man went home and tried with his right and left hands with no results. The old man then called his wife in to help him. She tried and tried with the same results. The wife then suggested they ask the young pretty lady that lived next door. They both went next door and asked the young girl, who said she would be happy to help. She also tried and tried with the same results. The next day, the 85-year-old man went back to the doctor's office and gave him the jar, which was as clean and empty as on the previous day. The doctor asked what happened, and the man explained, "Well, Doc, it's like this. First I tried with my right hand, but nothing. Then I tried with my left hand, but still nothing. Then I asked my wife for help. She tried with her right hand, then her left, still nothing. She tried with her mouth, first with the teeth in, then with her teeth out, and still nothing. We even called up Arlene, the young lady next door, and she tried too, first with both hands, but still nothing. The doctor was shocked. You asked your neighbor to help you get sperm. The old man replied, no, we asked her to help us open the damn jar. And no matter what we tried, we still couldn't get the jar open. Once, there were 3 bats. They lived in a cave surrounded by 3 castles. One night, the bats made a bet to see who could drink the most blood. The first bat comes home one night and has blood dripping off his fangs. The other 2 bats are amazed and asked how much blood he had drunk. The first bat said, see that castle over there? I drank the blood of 3 people. The second bat goes out on his night and comes back with blood around his mouth. The other 2 bats are astonished and ask how many people's blood had he drunk. The bat said, see that castle over there? I drank the blood of 5 people. The third bat goes out on his night and comes back covered in blood. This was totally amazing to the other 2 bats. They ask how much blood he drank. The third bat said, see that castle over there? And the other bats nod. Well, says the third bat, I didn't. A classroom full of first-year veterinary students were participating in their first day of anatomy class. For the lecture, the professor begins by unveiling a dead cow under a white sheet lying on an operating table. The professor tells the class in veterinary medicine there are 2 qualities you must possess as a doctor, the first of which is a strong stomach. You cannot, under any circumstance, be disgusted by anything involving an animal's body cow. For example, the professor pulls back the sheet and sticks his finger right up the dead cow's pulls out his finger and sticks it in his mouth. The students just there, paralyzed at what they see. Now go ahead and do the same thing, each of you, the professor says. Freaked out, the students take several minutes but eventually take turns sticking their fingers up into the anal cavity of the dead cow and then sucking on them. Once everyone is finished, the professor continues on with his lesson. Now, the second important quality you must possess is a keen observation. You see, I stuck in my middle finger up the cow's and I sucked on my index finger. Now learn to pay attention. One day, a hippie gets a ride on a public bus and sees a hot young nun. He sits down next to her and promptly asks if she would like to have sex, to which she immediately says no and walks off the bus. The bus driver leans over and says, hey guy, I know how to get that nun to have sex with you. Naturally, the hippie asks, and the bus driver tells him that every night at midnight, the nun goes to an old graveyard to pray for God to forgive her for her past, and that he should dress up like God and tell the nun she will be forgiven if she has sex with you. The hippie gives his thanks and runs to the nearest costume shop. Later that evening, the hippie gets ready for his big night and drives down to the graveyard and sees the nun praying on her knees. He says, behold, I have heard your prayers, and you shall be forgiven if you have sex with me. The nun agrees, but asks if they can have anal sex in order to keep her virginity. The hippie agrees, and once they are finished, the hippie jumps back and pulls off his mask and says, surprise, it's me, the hippie. The nun jumps up and pulls off her mask and says, surprise, it's me, the bus driver. A professor at Auburn University is giving a seminar on the supernatural. Getting a feel for his students, he asks, how many of you believe in ghosts? About 80 of his students raise their hands. That's a good start, I suppose. Those of you who believe in ghosts, how many have actually seen a ghost? About 30 students raise their hands. That's good. I'm really glad you're taking this seriously. Okay, has anyone here ever talked to a ghost? About a dozen students raise their hands. A great response. Has anyone ever touched a ghost? 2 students raised their hands. That's fantastic. But let me ask you one last question. Have any of you ever made love to a ghost? One student in the back raises his hand. The professor is astonished. He removes his glasses, takes a step back, and says, son, in all the years I've been giving this lecture, no one has ever actually claimed to have slept with a ghost. Why don't you come up here and tell us about it? The redneck student replies with a nod and a grin and begins to make his way up to the podium. The professor says, well, tell us what it's like to have sex with a ghost. The student replies, ghost? Oh, I thought you said goats. Recently, a routine police patrol was parked outside a bar in Lynchburg, Virginia. After last call, the officer noticed a man leaving the bar so apparently intoxicated that he could barely walk. The man stumbled around the parking lot for a few minutes, with the officer quietly observing. After what seemed an eternity, in which he tried his keys on 5 different vehicles, the man managed to find his car and fall into it. He sat there for a few minutes as a number of other patrons left the bar and drove off. Finally, he started the car, switched the wipers on and off. It was a fine, dry summer night. Flicked the blinkers on and off a couple of times, honked the horn, and then switched on the lights. He moved the vehicle forward a few inches, reversed a little, and then remained still for a few more minutes as some more of the other patrons' vehicles left. At last, when his was the only car left in the parking lot, he pulled out and drove slowly down the road. The police officer, having waited patiently all this time, now started up his patrol car, put on the flashing lights, and promptly pulled the man over and administered a breathalyzer test. To his amazement, the breathalyzer indicated no evidence that the man had consumed any alcohol at all. Dumbfounded, the officer said, "I'll have to ask you to accompany me to the police station. This breathalyzer equipment must be broken." "I doubt it," said the truly proud redneck. "Tonight, I'm the designated decoy." A Harley rider is passing the zoo when he sees a little girl leaning into the lion's cage. Suddenly, the lion grabs her by the cuff of her jacket and tries to pull her inside to slaughter her under the eyes of her screaming parents. The biker jumps off his bike, runs to the cage, and hits the lion square on the nose with a powerful punch. Whimpering from the pain, the lion jumps back, letting go of the girl, and the biker brings her to her terrified parents, who thank him endlessly. A New York Times reporter has watched the whole event. The reporter says, "Sir, this was the most gallant and brave thing I saw a man do in my whole life." The biker replies, "Why, it was nothing, really. The lion was behind bars. I just saw this little kid in danger and acted as I felt was right." The reporter says, "Well, I'm a journalist from the New York Times, and tomorrow's paper will have this story on the front page. So what do you do for a living, and what political affiliation do you have?" The biker replies, "I'm a U.S. Marine and a Republican." The following morning, the biker buys the New York Times to see if it indeed brings news of his actions and reads on the front page, "U.S. Marine assaults African immigrant and steals his lunch." Tonight, I thought my husband was acting weird. We had made plans to meet at a bar to have a drink. I was shopping with my friends all day long, so I thought he was upset at the fact that I was a bit late, but he made no comment on it. Conversation wasn't flowing, so I suggested that we go somewhere quiet so we could talk. He agreed, but he didn't say much. I asked him what was wrong. He said nothing. I asked him if it was my fault that he was upset. He said he wasn't upset, that it had nothing to do with me and not to worry about it. On the way home, I told him that I loved him. He smiled slightly and kept driving. I can't explain his behavior. I don't know why he didn't say, "I love you too." When we got home, I felt as if I had lost him completely, as if he wanted nothing to do with me anymore. He just sat there quietly and watched TV. He continued to seem distant and absent. Finally, with silence all around us, I decided to go to bed. About 15 minutes later, he came to bed. To my surprise, he responded to my caress, and we made love. But I still felt that he was distracted, and his thoughts were somewhere else. He fell asleep. I cried. I don't know what to do. I'm almost sure that his thoughts are with someone else. My life is a disaster. His diary. Harley wouldn't start today, can't figure it out, but at least I got laid. A little boy was doing his math homework. He said to himself, 2 + 5, that son of a bitch is 7. 3 + 6, that son of a bitch is 9. His mother heard what he was saying and gasped, "What are you doing?" The little boy answered, "I'm doing my math homework, Mum." "And this is how your teacher taught you to do it?" The mother asked. "Yes," he answered. Infuriated, the mother asked the teacher the next day, "What are you teaching my son in math?" The teacher replied, "Right now, we are learning addition." The mother asked, "And are you teaching them to say 2 + 2, that son of a bitch is 4? After the teacher stopped laughing, she answered, "What I taught them was 2 + 2, the sum of which is 4. There was a young virgin girl that was going out on a date for the first time, and she told her grandmother about it. Her grandmother says, "Sit here and let me tell you about those young boys. He is going to try to kiss you. You are going to like that, but don't let him do that." She continued, "He is going to try to feel your breast. You are going to like that, but don't let him do that. He is going to try to put his hand between your legs. You are going to like that, but don't let him do that." Then the grandmother said, "But most importantly, he is going to try to get on top of you and have his way with you. You're going to like that, but don't let him do that. It will disgrace the family." With that bit of advice in mind, the granddaughter went on her date and could not wait to tell her grandmother about it. The next day, she told her grandmother that her date went just as the old lady said. She said, "Grandmother, I didn't let him disgrace the family. When he tried, I turned him over, got on top of him, and disgraced his family." Gennaro will be in Florence for only 6 months. He walks to work 20 blocks every day and passes a shoe store. Each day he stops and looks in the window to admire the Bocelli leather shoes. He wants those shoes so much, it's all he can think about. After about 2 months, he saves the price of the shoes, $300, and purchases them. Every Friday night, the Italian community holds a dance in the church basement. Gennaro seizes this opportunity to wear his Bocelli shoes for the first time. He asks Sophia to dance, and as they dance, he asks her, "Sophia, do you wear red panties tonight?" Startled, Sophia replies, "Yes, Gennaro, I do wear red panties tonight, but how do you know?" Gennaro answers, "I see the reflection in my new $300 Bocelli leather shoes. How do you like them?" Next, he asks Rosa to dance. After a few minutes, he asks, "Rosa, do you wear white panties tonight?" Rosa answers, "Yes, Gennaro, I do." "But how do you know that?" He replies, "I see the reflection in my new $300 Bocelli leather shoes. How do you like them?" Now, as the evening is almost over and the last song is being played, Gennaro asks Carmela to dance. Midway through the dance, his face turns red. He states, "Carmela, be still, my heart. Please, please tell me you wear no panties tonight. Please, please tell me this true." Carmela smiles coyly and answers, "Yes, Gennaro, I wear no panties tonight." Gennaro gasps, "Thank God, I thought I had a crack in my $300 Bocelli leather shoes." A couple of women were playing golf one sunny Saturday morning. The first of the twosome teed off and watched in horror as her ball headed directly toward a foursome of men playing the next hole. Indeed, the ball hit one of the men, and he immediately clasped his hands together at his crotch, fell to the ground, and proceeded to roll around in evident agony. The woman rushed down to the man and immediately began to apologize. She explained that she was a physical therapist. "Please allow me to help. I'm a physical therapist, and I know I could relieve your pain if you'd allow me," she told him earnestly. Oh, no, I'll be all right. I'll be fine in a few minutes," he replied breathlessly as he remained in the fetal position, still clasping his hands together at his crotch. But she persisted, and he finally allowed her to help him. She gently took his hands away and laid them to the side. She loosened his pants, and she put her hands inside and began to massage him. She then asked him, "How does that feel?" To which he replied, "It feels great, but my thumb still hurts like hell." An old man and woman were married for years, even though they hated each other. When they had a confrontation, screams and yelling could be heard deep into the night. A constant statement was heard by the neighbors who feared the man the most. "When I die, I will dig my way up out of the grave to come back and haunt you for the rest of your life." They believed he practiced black magic and was responsible for missing cats and dogs. There were also strange sounds at all hours. The man was feared and enjoyed the respect it garnished. One day he died abruptly under strange circumstances, and the funeral had a closed casket. After the burial, his wife went straight to the local bar and began to party as if there was no tomorrow. The gaiety of her actions was becoming extreme, while her neighbors approached in a group to ask these questions. "Are you not afraid, concerned, worried?" This man practiced black magic and stated that when he died, he would dig his way up out of the grave to come back and haunt you for the rest of your life. The wife put down her drink and said, "Let the old guy dig. I had him buried upside down." One Sunday, a pastor asked his congregation to consider giving a little extra in the offering plate. He said that whoever gave the most would be able to pick out 3 hymns. After the offering plates were passed, the pastor glanced down and noticed that someone had contributed a $1,000 bill. He was so excited that he immediately shared his joy with his congregation and said he'd like to personally thank the person who had placed the money in the plate. A very quiet, elderly, saintly widow shyly raised her hand. The pastor asked her to come to the front. Slowly, she made her way to the pastor. He told her how wonderful it was that she gave so much and asked her to pick out 3 hymns. Her eyes brightened as she looked over the congregation, pointed to the 3 handsomest men in the building and said, "I'll take him and him and him." An old blind cowboy wanders into an all-girl biker bar by mistake. He finds his way to a bar stool and orders some coffee. After sitting there for a while, he yells to the waiter, "Hey, you want to hear a blonde joke?" The bar immediately falls absolutely silent. In a very deep, husky voice, the woman next to him says, "Before you tell that joke, cowboy, I think it's only fair, given that you are blind, that you should know 5 things. 1. The bartender is a blonde girl with a baseball bat. 2. The bouncer is a blonde girl. 3. I'm a 6-foot-tall, 175-pound blonde woman with a black belt in karate. 4. The woman sitting next to me is blonde and a professional weightlifter. 5. The lady to your right is blonde and a professional wrestler." Now, think about it seriously, mister. Do you still really want to tell that joke? The blind cowboy thinks for a second, shakes his head, and mutters, "No. Not if I'm going to have to explain it 5 times. I took my dad to the mall the other day to buy some new shoes. He is 66. We decided to grab a bite at the food court. I noticed he was watching a teenager sitting next to him. The teenager had spiked hair in all different colors: green, red, orange, and blue. My dad kept staring at her. The teenager kept looking and would find my dad staring every time. When the teenager had had enough, she sarcastically asked, "What's the matter, old man? Never done anything wild in your life?" Knowing my dad, I quickly swallowed my food so that I would not choke on his response. I knew he would have a good one. In classic style, he responded without batting an eyelid. "Got stoned once and saw a peacock. I was just wondering if you were my daughter." A tourist is in Spain and goes to a fancy restaurant for dinner. As he looks around, he notices a diner being served a beautifully garnished dish with 2 gigantic meatballs in the middle. When the waiter asks him for his order, the man asks him about the meatball dish. The waiter explains that the meatballs are bull's testicles, and when the bull loses the bullfight, the bull is brought to the restaurant and this beautiful dish is made. The diner tells the waiter that he wants the bull's testicles for dinner, but the waiter tells him that only 1 bull a day is brought to the restaurant, but he can have it tomorrow. The diner agrees. The next day, the diner goes to the restaurant and orders the testicle dish. When his food is brought out, he notices that the meatballs are extremely small. He mentions this to the waiter, and the waiter replies, "Well, sir, you have to understand, sometimes the bull wins." The nun teaching Sunday school was speaking to her class one morning, and she asked the question, "When you die and go to heaven, which part of your body goes first?" Susie raised her hand and said, "I think it's your hands." "Why do you think it's your hands, Susie?" Susie replied, "Because when you pray, you hold your hands together in front of you, and God just takes your hands first." "What a wonderful answer," the nun said. Little Johnny raised his hand and said, "Sister, I think it's your legs." The nun looked at him with the strangest look on her face. "Now, little Johnny, why do you think it would be your legs?" Little Johnny said, "Well, I walked into Mommy and Daddy's bedroom the other night. Mommy had her legs straight up in the air, and she was saying, 'Oh, God, I'm coming.' If Dad hadn't pinned her down, we'd have lost her." The nun fainted. Little Johnny was in his class when the teacher asked the children what their fathers did for a living. All the typical answers came up: fireman, policeman, salesman, etc. Johnny was being uncharacteristically quiet, and so the teacher asked him about his father. "My father's an exotic dancer in a gay cabaret and takes off all his clothes in front of other men. Sometimes, if an offer is really good, he'll go out to the alley with some guy and have sex with him for money." The teacher obviously shaken by this statement, hurriedly set the other children to work on some coloring and took little Johnny aside to ask him, "Is that really true about your father?" "No," said Johnny. "He's actually a lawyer, but I was too embarrassed to say so in front of the other kids."